Hello again, everybody, and welcome. It's the two-man game right here on Claves Online. I'm Bob Ramsey. That is my partner, Matt Roccio, as we talk some college hoops centered specifically around St. Louis U and the NBA. And our little two-man game does our little thing twice a week. And we're glad that you are with us. This was going to be a weird one initially in that, Rocc, I was going to be in a hotel room in Amherst, Massachusetts, for the Billikens getting ready for the UMass game Thursday. That game has been postponed, and now the Billikens won't play until Sunday. And games, many games, coast to coast, are being postponed, canceled. And what's interesting, even some forfeits, as all the leagues are scrambling to come up with a postponement forfeiture policy.
Yeah, we got to give some credit to Kim English and George Mason for getting a game going with Kansas on New Year's Day. That's pretty impressive when you look at how difficult it has been for some of these teams to find a pairing. Pretty impressive job by Kimmy. You know, we talk a lot about recruiting, we talk a lot about coaching, but I can't remember which coach it was that I heard just a few weeks ago talk about how more so than college football, scheduling is such a huge part of that equation as a coach. And so seeing somebody like Kim, jump in as a young guy and be able to get that done, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's how you continue to elevate your rep as a terrific coach and a stand-up guy in the business. And those kinds of things will continue to boost his resume. He's really going places. And I'm looking forward to seeing him this year in the Atlantic 10. So the Billikens don't get their typical Atlantic 10 start, missing 2 games now due to COVID issues. And it will be interesting. The general rule, and I think I saw one conference maybe with a different number by 1. Basically, everybody is saying if you have 7 players and at least one of your 4 coaches, your head coach and your 3 coaches who are allowed to recruit, that's really who your coaches are supposed to be. And at least one of them able to be available for a game, then you got to play. And then if you choose not to play, it can be considered a forfeit. I think they're leaving some wiggle room in most conferences for extenuating circumstances, but I think it's not a bad rule. You and I have debated this as we're, like everybody, all the way up to the CDC, trying to figure out where we go with this thing, that having players who are asymptomatic be able to play, or at least with a very short quarantine period, that might be the only way to salvage a legitimate season.
Yeah, it's going to be tricky, and you'd hate to see that situation play out where they only get to field the team with 7 or 8 guys, because then obviously you run the risk of guys pushing themselves to a point where they might get injured and things like that. So you'd hate to see that happen, but at the same time, I think finding a medium ground where you're like you said, kind of trying to navigate a middle ground through all these changes and all these different guidelines, I think is probably the hardest. But if you can figure it out, the best way to do it, which isn't surprising, that's kind of usually how these things play out, is not going one extreme way or another is usually a bad thing to do and usually leads to trouble. But if you can find a middle ground and play with 8 or 9 guys, I think that's something that SLU can get by. And again, I think that's better than the current situation where forfeits and rescheduling and everything like that is completely up in the air.
Well, last year the Bills played 2/3 of a season. Who else was it in the conference? Was it UMass? I think only played half a season. Yeah. I mean, you need to be playing legit seasons. You need to have 25 plus games, pushing your 30 games that you want to play. So they're striving to get to that, and hopefully they can. It seems like every day new guidelines, not just for athletes, but for regular folk, are coming down from the CDC, and it seems like little by little they're getting more liberal. So hopefully
Yeah, I mean the 10-day to 5-day thing. I mean that was a big thing because Carter Chapley, who reports for the Billikens over at Scoops with Danny Mack and does an incredible job. He was kind of talking about if SLU starts observing that 5-day window, well, then the amount of players they could have available against Richmond, that could completely change the equation. We're looking at, maybe 7 or 8 players, if it's the full 10-day window, maybe 2 or 3 of that probably 5-player number might become available if that's the new window there in 5 days. And so that could be very useful as well. By the way, talking about the A10 right now, we didn't get to talk about it a lot since our last pod, and obviously we've had a little bit of a break, and there hasn't been a lot of basketball since our last pod. But nonetheless, the last time we talked about the A10, I made a statement about SLU and about how I had a lot of faith about how well they were going to finish this year. And I said I think maybe they're even better than Davidson. And then 14 hours later, Davidson beat Alabama. So that was fun. And we haven't got to talk about that, but I got to eat crow on that one. Davidson, it's kind of like the opposite, where I keep waiting for the Bonnies to really show me what I thought they were going to be this season. And while Davidson's just every game, they're getting a little bit better. So that's, a lot of negativity. And unfortunately, we got to talk about the how we get to these next games. Already, I'm kind of looking forward to this conference schedule and how this is going to play out. And man, that game against Alabama was very impressive. Davidson showed me something, and that's going to be a tough one going forward.
Well, they got over the hump where SLU couldn't against Auburn. Auburn playing LSU.
That's a great point.
Right
Because
now.
Bama made a comeback.
Yeah, and so I think when you look at the league, you look at, I think there's a half a dozen teams that can finish. Maybe a half a dozen teams, if things break right for them, finish in the top spot. I think all along we've thought St. Bonaventure was the team to beat, and that's probably still true. But Richmond has proved with all their guys back that they're legit. Davidson has proved that they're legit. So it's not. I don't think it's going to be a walk away for the Bonnies.
So looking forward to that conference play. The big thing now with SLU is they had a big layoff last year, and that was unfortunately where things kind of came. They just didn't have the same momentum. They didn't have the same cohesion. And when you can't shoot, when you're running passing drills in a dorm room, things are completely different. So this one is not as stark as that one, but nonetheless, looking at this game going forward, and next week after such a long break, it'll be I think just over 2. I think it'll be just at 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
It'll be over 2. It'll be over 2 weeks.
It'll be over 2 weeks. So obviously not 30 days. So what are the kind of things that we need to be watching out for, and what are the kind of pitfalls that SLU needs to avoid that they got into last year coming off that long 30-day break?
Without knowing everybody's medical history, which the broadcaster is not supposed to, it appeared to me that fatigue and focus were two things that really hit the Billikens hard after that 30-day layoff. So those are the things to look at. Can you expect, and let's say you're not playing with 7 players, you've got 10 or 11 or whatever. Can Yuri Collins and Gibson Jimerson and others, can they pound out 30 minutes, 32 minutes, or will they physically be able to do that? I think there were some challenges with that last year, and fatigue makes cowards of us all. And one of the things that it affects right out of the gate is focus. When you're tired, it's hard to focus, and it's hard to play in a cohesive manner. So those would be 2 things that aren't necessarily on the stat sheet that come up, but 2 things I'll be looking for. But some things that can affect you when you're tired, shooting in general, but free throw shooting in particular, right? Tired legs, lack of focus, free throws don't go in. So there are maybe some little things. And then we've already been in some ways concerned about turnover totals in big games. Let's keep an eye on turnovers, because that can also be a measurement of a lack of focus. So let's look at free throw shooting and turnovers the next 3 or 4 games and see if we can make a correlation.
One other question on that one.
Hopefully everybody's terrific and we don't worry about it.
One other question on that one, because I think this is pertinent, and we've talked about this has been an under threat of the season. How different do you think it is for them to handle that as a team when last year, longer break, but you had guys like Jordan Goodwin and Hassan French who, in a leadership role. And this year, when we talked about the leadership role, they've been waiting for somebody to step up. And it seemed like Yuri really did step up in that last week before this unfortunate, break hit. But I wonder how much the leadership factor and just having, a lot more young players and new players on this roster could affect them, not being out there for 2 weeks and being able to, and now over the last week, as Travis Ford kind of intimated, not being able to even practice at full strength.
But they are practicing, whereas last year there wasn't very much practicing till really a couple of days before that month break was over. Keep in mind, too, last year, no team meals. The guy never went in the locker room all year. So those things are a little bit different, and you'd like to think that you can hang together by still, for those who are healthy enough to still be together, eating, working out, practicing, locker rooms, all that stuff that makes you feel like you're part of the team and not just a guy kind of out there on an iceberg by yourself.
All right, and so unfortunately, SLU will be back in action this weekend finally. Obviously, the unfortunate part is that we haven't got to talk about them in playing a live game in 2 weeks. So we're going to talk a little bit about that either Friday, most likely Sunday or Saturday afternoon. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that Richmond game. But to close out this episode, next 10, 15 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit of NBA because Christmas is past now. The real NBA season is here, by the way. I love that when we were talking with Mike Claiborne, he mentioned that the real NBA season starts on Christmas because there's just something with that guy and unofficial starts of seasons on other holidays. You got Flag Day with baseball, you got Christmas with the NBA. I think it's perfect. So the big thing this week that everyone's been talking about is LeBron James last night against the Rockets starts at the 5 at the center position. A little harken back to Magic Johnson. He led the league in assists, a year ago and was pretty much the point guard for the Lakers. And now he starts at the 5 for the first time ever in his career, has a triple-double in a game that, honestly, it really shouldn't be close. The Rockets are the worst team in the West, if not the entire league. But nonetheless, it was interesting to see him defensively and kind of facilitating in a different role as the 5.
Well, that's what a team leader is supposed to do. It's a shame that they're not getting anything from Davis. And nobody's gotten anything from Howard in years. And let's be honest, most of his career. With a guy that's got a chiseled Adonis body and that athletic, he should be a Hall of Famer. And
he might be.
No, there's not a chance.
Dwight Howard, you think no chance? Oh, there's some people out there that would really piss you off.
What a waste of a body. It's really, well, I find it a shame because back when he was with the Magic, I was a big fan. And then,
8 All-Stars. Yeah. He's got a ring. 8 All-NBA, I should say. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Listen, it's going to annoy you, but in 10 years from now, people are going to start talking about him as an NBA, as a basketball Hall of Fame. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
That's okay. Oh, first of all, I don't care. I don't get worked up about those things. I'm not trying to convince anybody, but he had a heyday. He really did, but he's not the guy you want when you're trying to win a championship, and hasn't been for a long time.
Yeah, he was a solid backup 2 years ago on that Laker team, but that's
okay.
Past now. Yeah,
okay.
But that's past now, and so that's really, like you said, that's kind of the point they're at now. They have to play LeBron there because they got nobody else.
Yeah, and I didn't bring this up to take shots at a guy who's had a very capable NBA career. He's old now, and we talked about it. Pick a name. When you got a whole bunch of old guys together, to expect them all to be as good as they were when they were MVPs or All-Stars, it's folly. And that's why LeBron's having to play that spot. So for the Dwight Howard folks, not taking a shot at the guy. Yeah, I guess it was a little, but I wasn't trying to be mean-spirited about it. It's just that here's a guy.
Stirring the pot.
Yeah. I guess we need to do more hot takes.
And there was also just a big discussion
anybody who likes him sucks. No,
the NBA 70, the NBA top 75 thing came out this year, and he was one of the guys who was right on the edge that people were having a big debate about. Klay Thompson was another one as well. And it's
Let him
just funny
finish
because
their career.
I know. Well, I know, but people have been talking about Dwight Howard and that MVP, not MVP, Hall of Fame conversation because of the 3 defensive rookie players of the year. So I didn't mean to get caught into it. I didn't want to. Honestly, what I want to talk about, because it was an impressive game by LeBron. Also, Westbrook was actually efficient and he had a triple double. And again, they barely won. He shot a 17-foot jumper off the top of the backboard as well, which is just inexplicable, but nonetheless, he hit like 55% of his shots from the field, so that was solid. But nonetheless, the Lakers have a problem. We're going to talk about the standings a little bit later on, but the Lakers are sitting right now with the 7th seed in the West, and they're below 500. So that's odd. But the thing that was really interesting is that at the same time that LeBron's playing the 5 and having a triple double against the Rockets, the Warriors were playing a very odd game against the Nuggets without Draymond Green because of COVID protocols. And I'm not comparing Draymond Green and LeBron, but what LeBron was doing at different parts of the game, which was dropping into a little bit of a zone on pick and rolls on defense and being a disruptor, as well as anchoring in the paint against bigger guys, and then being a passer out of the top of the key in a different role and turning his back to the basket and doing some elbow passes while the offense runs around him, and something we haven't seen a lot with the Lakers over the last couple of years. It was interesting to watch that stuff happen because the Warriors offense completely clunky against the Nuggets. And it wasn't because the Nuggets are that great of a defensive team, but it was because people do not understand how incredibly important Draymond Green is to the Warriors offense, because people see 6 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists, and there's like, well, yeah, he's a triple single guy. Well, he looks weird. He looks like he shoots with a backpack on at all times, but he's still, the second most important cog in the best offense in the NBA because of what he can do on the short roll, what he can do as a facilitator from the top of the key, what it allows him to do from the elbow with Steph Curry running off the ball. They got guys like Jordan Poole. Once Klay Thompson comes back, it only gets more dangerous. But I really thought it was interesting, just the dichotomy of watching the Lakers move LeBron 6'8", 250 to the 5, and the way he operated slightly different than we've ever seen him operate, and then the way that Draymond does and how important he is to that Warriors team. It's just it's incredible. We're seeing a little bit more of a comeback with some of these bigger centers like DeAndre Ayton, but man, right now with the style of basketball being played, 6'8", 230, 250, if you can bang in the post a little bit, but you can be that facilitator on the short roll on offense, it just produces such a fun offensive game of basketball. And it's goofy, and I know some people hate it, and I personally like that we're getting a little bit of a zig to the zag with guys like DeAndre Ayton, but I loved seeing LeBron James as kind of like the pinnacle of this small ball era. It was a great game to watch.
Well, and it goes to what we're saying about positionless basketball. If they could get on a sustained, if they could win on a consistent basis, to say that you can play that way. Moreover, I think you'll see teams being able to go 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", put another 6'8" in there, and all playing all over the floor. The key with positions is who you're going to guard. And that's where LeBron's got to show that he can do enough to disrupt defensively and then drive the opposition crazy trying to guard him. That's where you get the mismatches.
Yeah, I love what Draymond does, and he's the thing that made the Warriors lineup of death, the very first one with Andre Iguodala and Klay Thompson back in 2015. He's what really opened it up when they moved him to the 5 late in games. And so having LeBron James play the 5 in that kind of role, it's just, it's pure, just like basketball cocaine. I mean, you can't do it any better. I mean, there's nothing else I could do better than taking Draymond Green and making him 2 inches taller, 20 pounds heavier, but also faster, a better shooter, and a better passer, and a better shot blocker and things like that. It was so fun to watch him do it. He's not doing it tonight. They're starting Dwight Howard, by the way. They're in Memphis right now. Our good friend Frank Cusimano is about 7 rows up watching LeBron James so far put up 11 points on 4 of 4 shooting, including 3 of 3 from behind the arc, to open up 11 points in his first 8 minutes from the game. So LeBron playing a back-to-back against the Grizzlies after playing the Rockets, I'm kind of shocked to see that. I'm happy because I honestly can't wait to hear Frank talk about getting to see LeBron that close, because I cannot imagine that just being a otherworldly experience.
And a shout out to the Grizzlies with John Morant back. They've got their backcourt intact again, and they've got a big who's been playing very well. And we'll see how he does tonight over the course of the game. And one more tip of the cap to the Grizzlies television sideline reporter, Claves Online contributor Rob Fisher, who got called into duty because the Grizzlies radio play-by-play guy got ill while they were on the road. And Fish stepped in and did play-by-play and did a great job. So a tip of the cap to native St. Louis and Rob Fisher with some NBA play-by-play.
Hey, man, tip of the cap to him. Like you said, tip of the cap to the Grizzlies. That brings us to our next topic that I wanted to hit. Like I said, the season has started now that it is post-Christmas, and there are some surprising teams. The Grizzlies are definitely one of them. They're fourth in the West right now, and I think it's clear that they've reached that kind of second tier in the NBA, and especially in the West. Yeah. The Warriors, the Suns, and the Jazz are the tippy top of the West. They're completely different. That's a championship tier. I would say that the Nets and the Bucks, despite the fact that the Bucks are third right now, in the East are probably the other two teams in that championship tier. But nonetheless, the Grizzlies are surprising fourth right now. The Bulls, despite some wackiness with the rosters they've had to play, being one of the teams that was hit hardest before the NBA really started enacting some new protocols to allow teams to play with other G League players and emergency contracts and things like that. They're second in the East. I think a lot of people had a lot of high hopes for them, but second in the East is very surprising. And then you have the Cavaliers in the fifth seed. I mean, I didn't expect this, and I also didn't expect the fact that right now, and I think this is only the second time in the last 20 years, there are more above 500 teams in the Eastern Conference in playoff contention than there are in the West. Right now, even without the expanded playoffs of the 9th and the 10th spot, the 7th and the 8th seed in the West are below 500, which – years ago when you had teams like the Trailblazers and the Thunder and the Rockets playing like they were, you wouldn't have expected this. But the West has undoubtedly fallen off. They still have, I think, the best two teams in the league in the Warriors and the Suns. But it's clear the rest of the West has fallen off a little bit. And at this point, I have very little hopes that, somebody like the Mavericks or even the Lakers, and now with the Paul George injury, that the Clippers can really challenge, that higher up of the West.
Yeah, as we already stated, Christmas is the opening, the unofficial opening of the NBA, and so it is reasonable to take a look at those things. But there's still tons of time for teams to make deals, for teams to get healthy, for teams to change their schemes to fit their personnel. There's still a lot of time, but I think you're right. There's no reason to expect that the cream in each conference won't stay at the top.
Yeah, the big thing for me is, can the Bulls keep this going for the rest of the season? Everything else, I think, is going to settle. Those top five teams are going to settle at the top. The big question for me is the East, much like the West, a three-man game? Is there a third person in that discussion with the Bucks and the Nets? Is it the Bulls? I'm not 100% sure yet. Is it the Heat when they're healthy? The Cleveland Cavaliers just lost Ricky Rubio, who, despite not being, a crazy great shooter, has really improved his offensive game here as he's gotten older and is a key leader on that team. So while he might not be the biggest impact in the box score every single game, that's a big loss for a Cavaliers team that's very young and needs that kind of leadership to continue their run. But as we kind of come back to it, the Grizzlies are great. And the big thing is, I haven't talked about the Nuggets nearly as much as I want to, because at some point I think people get annoyed by how much I like Nikola Jokic, which actually doesn't bother me. But at some point, Jamal Murray is going to come.
That's not even the top 10 reasons people get annoyed with you.
Good to know.
Firing shots now. This is hot take podcast.
There we go. But Jamal Murray is going to come back at some point this season. And there's no reason that we couldn't see the Nuggets put together, some kind of, 19-4 run or something along those lines that completely changes their position in the standings. And so there's a lot of injuries to watch for. Obviously, I would have said that you could keep on watching the Clippers for a late run, but now with the Paul George injury, that completely takes it out. Anthony Davis is going to be out for a while. It's going to be pretty deep into January before he's back. So at this point, I have no idea what to think of the Los Angeles Lakers. But they have LeBron James, they have Anthony Davis, and there's 10 spots. There's 10 chances to get into the playoffs now in the NBA, and so it wouldn't shock me at all if we see a run from the Lakers. But I'll be pessimistic and negative about it as often as I can really get a chance to.
I think that's fair. And I'm the shout out guy this week, and a shout out to former Billiken Jordan Goodwin, who got a 10-day contract and a call up to the Washington Wizards, got into a game for 3 minutes and 0 for 2 from the field, had to guard Jimmy Butler. How about that coming out of the game?
Yeah, he looked good though.
He did well.
He looked good though. Again, and that's going to be the stuff. If he can cause those guys fits, if he can guard guys, because then that's the big thing is Goodwin's got length. He's a great defender. He's only 6'3", but he can guard clearly guys who are 6'7" very well. That's the big thing there. I don't care if you're 6'3". If a team can list you as a small forward, that's a huge, weird, great thing in today's NBA.
Yeah, he can. We've seen it for years. He can guard the best player on the other team. Will he be able to score enough at the highest level to stay on the court? Because let's say you hold a guy to 2 for 10 and you're 0 for 5, you're still at a 4-point deficit. So, that's an overstatement, but yeah, he's hopefully he'll get some looks as they get healthier and Beal comes back. They're kind of loaded with guards, not a lot of great guards, but just guards ahead of him currently on the pecking order. So what you want to see is Jay Good get in there, do some things like he did the other night, stymie the Jimmy Butlers of the world and other wing players that he can get in their grill a little bit and get a taste. And then when they need him again, he can get another taste and then eventually work his way into being a full-fledged NBA player. I'm very excited for him.
Yeah, and really the only thing that's really held him back with how well he was playing with the Capital City Go-Go is that the Wizards just are one of the more lightly hit teams within the protocols right now for the NBA. And so, obviously we don't want that to change. We don't wish that to change for anybody on the roster, but nonetheless, that's really the only reason. If we were looking at a team like the Spurs or the Hawks who were going, or the Bulls who were going 7 or 8 guys deep almost off the G League or the 10-day contract or the emergency contract bench, not 8 guys deep, but 5, 6 guys deep, he easily could have gotten higher. That's why you saw a guy, a former Illini guy like Malcolm Hill get in. And there was a game where he was guarding Ayo Dosunmu, another former Illini guy who's playing really great for the Bulls. So he's going to get his chance this year a couple more times, I think, probably a couple more games in this stretch. So, good luck to Jordan, and obviously hope he shows out well.
And didn't I see St. Louis and Xavier Sneed get called up as well?
Did he really?
I
got to check that.
I could be wrong. We don't need to stop the show for that. But my point I was going to be is that more and more players are not just filling out college rosters all over the country. It's starting to percolate up to the highest levels. There are kids from St. Louis in this region right around St. Louis all over the world making money. And some of them are percolating up now to the highest league on the planet. And it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, Xavier Sneed signed a 10-day contract with the Memphis Grizzlies 2 days ago. I when you said it, I had a feeling because somebody made a joke about how all Xaviers must be on the Grizzlies from here on out because that's like the 4th one. It's ridiculous. They got Xavier Tillman and one other one on the roster. It's crazy. Before we go, I want to hit one more NBA topic. This was an article from Woj, Adrian Wojnarowski, for ESPN a couple days ago, talking about renewed momentum for an in-season NBA tournament. Mid-season would be a misnomer, I think is how I phrased it earlier, because it would start in December, the pool play, if you will, and then it would close out before Christmas. And so essentially the breakdown, according to Woj, would be the pool play would, like I said, would start in December, and then it would get to the point where the best records from the pool play would advance to an 8-team single elimination tournament that, like I said, would end before Christmas. The idea right now is that the winning team, every player would get a $1 million purse. And alongside this proposal, and this is what I actually think is the most important part of this proposal, would be reducing the regular season games from 82 to 78. And then obviously there would be a TV deal connected to this tournament that would then hopefully bring in more money to then make up for the fact that they would be losing collectively as the NBA 60 games. Woj also points out that they would need to find ways to make sure the players' money isn't affected, for everyone who doesn't get that extra $1 million for their games getting cut down from 82 to 78. But overall, the main goal of this would be, we're talking about right now, how hard it is sometimes to get really locked in game 34 of an 82-game season. But if the players are more locked in on a daily basis because there's some extra incentive, the games are better. The games are a better watch in December. That helps with ratings, so on and so forth. So overall, just on that surface right now, your thoughts, Bob Ramsey?
Off the top, if they would reduce the regular season by a few more games, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all.
Okay.
And just to, call it the NBA holiday tournament if you wanted.
Yeah.
And tie it in with all the holidays. I think you could have a lot of fun with it and make it feel like a really festive kind of tournament. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever all inclusive. It's a December festival tournament. I think you could really do a lot of things to get that feeling across to fans who are kind of like, oh, okay, the season didn't even start till Christmas. I mean, our guy, Mike Claiborne, has said that, and I agree with him, by the way. Both the NHL and the NBA, because we've seen it. It's not a theory. Go back and look. When restrictions years ago with players associations, lockouts and so forth, reduced their schedules to about 50 games, the product, the regular season product, was leaps and bounds ahead of what we see more often than not. That's not to say that the teams that are really good are playing hard every night. Well, that's why they're really good. But what it would do is bring the dregs up, because everybody knows there's fewer chances to recover from mistakes. We got to go out every night. It becomes almost a prelim to the Stanley Cup playoffs, to the NBA playoffs. So you reduce the regular season schedule for an in-season tournament. I don't have a problem for it. Only going to 78 games, I don't know what I've really achieved. I'm still grinding through all these games.
It's clear though that the reduction and then the idea, it's all about revenue streams, because the biggest issue right now in sports is that we cannot expect leagues to contract teams or contract the schedule because there's too much revenue tied up in the numbers being at where they are now. And so the only way to change that is to find other ways of revenue streams and kind of change out the flow. And this is what the NBA is doing. And so that's why I think we're only seeing the 4-game, change. I think you're right. I think, going down to 75 right off the bat, I think would be the smart move right off, cut 7 off right off the bat. I know it's still small, but you cut, 2 weeks out that way. And I think that would be the number right there. But again, X games is X amount of dollars. X amount of dollars from the TV deal on this tournament is one chunk of that. But, there are other issues with the players' money and how that breaks up and things like that. So there are other financial issues. Woj acknowledged that in his piece on ESPN.com. I think it's interesting. I wonder, though, if the $1 million per player is enough of an incentive. Now, here's why I think that might be enough, and why I think that's a good thread to start, which is the teams that are going to try the hardest in this situation are going to be the younger, that you're hoping to try harder, would be the younger, crappier teams. The good teams, especially with management right now. First of all, they have people who are making $35 million a year. So that's not going to, there's no reason LeBron or Kawhi or any of these guys who like to do load management would change their mindset just so, they can get another $1 million. Now, I wonder, says a lot about a guy if he won't try hard when there's a guy on his team making $650,000 who wants to pocket that $1 million. You got to wonder, maybe there's some team dynamic issues there as well. So I think in some ways there are enough, because the young teams, the guys that got a lot of, second round picks who are playing because they're not good. The Rockets, I can't see why maybe we'd see them, some of these young players who maybe are lollygagging through crappy possessions at the end of games or in the middle of games because they know the team sucks and no one's watching and no one's threatening their spot. Maybe it's a little bit different. And I think that's what the NBA's goal is. And I'm for leagues trying stuff. Now I say that, and then we get Major League Baseball, and I look like an ass. But nonetheless, I'm for teams trying. I'm for leagues trying stuff as long as they can admit when it goes completely crappy. And now again, I am talking directly to Major League Baseball commissioner.
Last thing from me, before free agency in baseball, it was common if a guy was jaking it on a team in contention that one of the veterans would come over and grab him by the scruff and say, "You better start playing because you're messing with my money." And back again before free agency, players could make multiples of their regular season salary by winning the World Series. So incentivizing winning with money, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think, things get risky that early, talking about a playoff spot or maybe draft picks, because I think it might be kind of hard to motivate certain players to play if the reward is a draft pick, because that's a guy who's going to replace me, because I was the 27th pick and that draft pick is going to be the 15th pick, and I don't want that right now. So maybe there's some issues there. I think there's a lot potentially here. The one thing I thought was funny is that Adam Silver was quoted by Woj as comparing it to the in-season tournaments that they have in soccer over in Europe. You don't even need to do that. Just push hard on the competitive factor early in the season. Push hard on pulling back the regular season games because that affects the competitiveness throughout the season. Those are the big things that NBA fans and basketball fans want to see already in the game. You do not need to be like, well, we're trying to be like European soccer. You're right that's exactly where you're stealing the idea from. But there are tens of reasons to look at this idea if you're the NBA and that do not involve the fact that you're trying to be like European soccer. I thought that was a weird statement for him to make, and it's just an added thing that just annoys me about some of these corporate commissioners. It makes sense for the game and the quality of the game, and it makes sense for more than that. It makes sense for development of young players, which is important to the game. And the NBA has done a great job with the G League. And I think this year has been a great example of how important expanding the G League was. These kind of rules, these kind of potential things, making the games more important and having something inherently there for these players is better for the game. And I'm always going to be, in favor of that.
Time to go watch the rest of the Grizzlies beat up on LeBron James. Some college football going on tonight, and I've been watching a bunch of Big East basketball. So we got a lot to do, and that'll wrap it up. We'll be back in a couple of days to preview the weekend. So that is Matt Rocc. I'm Bob Ramsey. It's the two-man game right here on Claibs Online, and we'll see you as we get ready for the Happy New Year coming up in a couple of days. See you later.